Hello, everyone, and welcome to another Insights from Women Leaders series. I'm the host, Dr. Rola Kaakeh, and I will be speaking with the guest leader today over the hour, incorporating our questions as well as the audience questions. But a little brief on the series. We launched the series to highlight the journeys and contributions of various women leaders who share their insights on a range of topics impacting their industries, our communities, and their role in shaping the future. Our guests have included leaders from various prestigious and reputable institutions. Their backgrounds are diverse, their accomplishments many, and the insights and perspectives provided are valuable. The goal is to learn from women thought leaders and decision makers to empower current and future leaders, both men and women, to positively impact organizations and communities. Diversity of thought, experiences, industries, and education and training is very important to us as it highlights the mosaic of perspectives represented in different settings that help drive decision-making and positive change. Now, I'll have about a 40-minute conversation with the leader, structured using questions we've traditionally asked our guest leaders. We ask the leaders similar questions throughout the series. This allows you to see the differences in responses and lived experiences. After that, I ask questions sent to us from the public prior to the session. Now it's time to welcome our guest leader, Dr. Jessica Daley. As Group Vice President of Strategic Sourcing at Premier, Dr. Daley leads Premier's pharmacy strategy and service as the Chief Pharmacy Officer. She has also previously served as Premier Vice President of Pharmacy Strategic Supplier Engagement, where she led their strategic relationships with core pharmaceutical suppliers and supported key member support initiatives, including ProvideGx and Intersecta. Prior to joining Premier, she served as Vice President of the Regional Pharmacy Group Purchasing Organization, or GPO, and distribution arm of the University of Pittsburgh Medical Center. And she has over 13 years of experience with Merck in a variety of sales, management, marketing, and medical affairs, as well as account management roles. She received her Bachelor of Science from the University of Pittsburgh in molecular biology and a doctorate in pharmacy from Duquesne University, and a Master of Art in Applied Health Economics from Washington and Jefferson College. So welcome, Dr. Daley. We're so happy that you're here, and I'm really looking forward to this conversation.
Thank you so much. Very happy to be here with you today.
Okay, so let's just jump in to the first question that always follows the brief bio of our wonderful leaders. And that is, even as you're listening to your own bio, did you expect to be where you are today?
Not in my wildest dreams would I have expected to be where I am today. Especially, my goal had always been when I was a kid and when I was in high school, I wanted to be a doctor, and I spent an incredible amount of time, even in college. As you said, my degree is in molecular biology. I spent an incredible amount of time in research. Spending the majority of it in orthopedics. I wanted to be an orthopedic surgeon, and made it kind of a career turn and started my work with Merck. Thought it was just going to be a brief stopover before continuing on to the next thing. And I'll never forget my boss, who was a female orthopedic surgeon, incredible leader herself. She said to me, "You're never coming back. You'll never come back to medicine after you do this." And I remember telling her, "There's not a chance. I'll be back. I know I will be back." And so it's, my career has taken a number of turns that never would have expected to bring me to where I am today. So it's been an incredible journey, and excited to talk more about it with you.
Awesome. I remember when we first even talked about it too, and it's just the way you were telling the story. You even were like surprised as you told me, and then you're like, then I moved here, and then it was just so great to see. And it's one of those things too that we sometimes often forget. Like, it even surprised us. It surprises us now, and even as we tell the story, right? You can kind of tell emotion within that. So I love that. So as you smiled, I was like, I remembered our conversation within that as well. Now we're going to start with the future in mind. Just briefly, and we're going to go into it more kind of as our conversation progresses. But now let's look at the future. What's in your future? What do you want your legacy to be?
So, I think back to even when I was considering going to medical school, and I started to put together some applications, and the advice that I had received was, don't tell anybody that you're doing this because you want to help patients. It's cliche, everyone hears it, you need to come up with something different. But when I think about all of the things that I've done throughout my career, my focus in the areas that I've gotten myself involved in, everything really comes down to that idea of helping patients. All of the choices that I've made, the different paths that I've taken, all come back to that one guiding principle. Whatever decisions we're making, the projects we get involved in, or the things that we look to accomplish in our careers, it really is that idea of I'm here to help patients. And I don't know where I ultimately will end up, if this is where I'm meant to be for the rest of my career, if there are other crazy turns and twists that may present themselves to me in the future. But I do want to be remembered as someone who created and supported advancement that helps to improve the lives of patients in this country.
Yeah. I love that you made that point, because we often think our legacy has to be super unique, super non-cliche, like you said, but in reality, it's fundamental. Like those foundational elements by which we build a career or a legacy should be simple, right? Like they don't need to be overly complicated. Later on in your goals and your action steps and all of that can be a lot more complicated, but that's really fair, right? And I think some of our other guest leaders too, when you simplify the word, it's such a big word in terms of legacy, but when you simplify it, you're able to kind of get to those foundational elements, which might seem like this basic term in terms of helping people, but actually it's very significant in terms of leaving behind that legacy. Now, can you elaborate a little bit on, or talk about really how your past and present experiences really shaped this outlook for you? You mentioned a little bit about how it's been kind of your life's work in a way, but has it really changed? Have you kind of swayed away from that in terms of, it being your foundation and come back to, or is this, can you talk a little bit about that, or has that always been your North Star?
I think that's always been the North Star. I mean, depending on the role that you're in, there's certainly different levels of impact that you can have, right? Starting my career in a sales organization, selling pharmaceutical products, your typical, what you would absolutely picture of a sales rep with a trunk full of samples. I started there. And it's sometimes can be harder to make that connection back to the patient and improving the health for patients, but I think you always have to find a way to tie it back, because no matter what discussions you're having, what strategies you're putting in place, it's really the litmus test to make sure that you're doing the right thing. Everybody really that's listening to this either has been a patient or knows a patient, has a family member who is a patient. And so if we're not finding ways to always tie back to that as the North Star, then I think we're failing ourselves, not only personally, but professionally.
Yeah. Very, very true. Now, through your successes as you've progressed in your career, we often, we highlight much of people's successes and all that they've done, but we know in order to achieve big success, there's also probably been several obstacles, challenges, failures along the way. So would you mind maybe sharing some failures or challenges that you experienced that also really shaped your outlook and maybe made you do things a little bit differently, or thought about, maybe you wished you would have done differently, or maybe actually make a conscious effort to. So really like your learnings from those failures of your failures towards your success, I would say.
Sure. So I think, some of the biggest challenges, and there's failures that go into that, but I think some of the biggest challenges really tie back to not knowing what all of the possibilities are, not understanding what a roadmap could look like in a career. So I never, when you'd asked earlier, did you think you would be where you're at? I never thought that I would be a pharmacist. Quite honestly, I thought that becoming a pharmacist was a crazy idea, and nobody in their right mind would ever want to be a pharmacist and stand in a retail pharmacy and count pills. But I think it showed a very maybe disappointing lack of understanding of what really exists in the market, what career paths look like, what types of opportunities are out there. And so that was just an early example of, I had met in a high school organic chemistry class. We had pharmacy students come in to talk about pharmacy, and they talked about retail pharmacy. And that was all that they really were able to share with the group. So we had no idea that pharmacists could work in a hospital or in other care settings, that you can have remote pharmacists, or even those that are like me that are more involved in the business side of healthcare. And so I never thought that I would ever want to be a pharmacist. And yet, as I got more involved in the industry and started to learn and understand the true impact that a pharmacist can make in the life of a patient, it was really important to gain those learnings. And I even had some experiences when I was at Merck, where I had applied for roles that I thought would be perfect, right? I thought I'd be well positioned. It was right in my swim lane of what I had focused and spent my early career really becoming an expert on. And I didn't get those jobs. And so there was a moment, and I had a boss at the time who was wonderful. He's still there at Merck, and I will thank him every day for the advice that he gave me, that you won't always get everything you want the first time you try for it, but you need to learn from it. And so from some of those experiences, I've learned a lot of what kind of I think contributed to certainly the failure of not getting the role I want, or contributed to some of the challenges of not understanding the market, is just knowing what is out there from the realm of possibility. So I went into my undergraduate degree thinking, I'm going to be a physician. I'm going to study molecular biology. I'm going to dig deeply into all things that will set me up for medical school, not realizing that there are many other paths that I could take. So I didn't diversify my background. I didn't take business classes. I didn't take other classes that would have given me more of a well-rounded experience. And so even from a pharmacy perspective, right, completely discounted pharmacy or anything pharmacy related, pharmaceutical related, until I started to learn more about it. And so then I had to go back. I went back and I got my degree in pharmacy. I went back and I got a master's in applied healthcare economics. I think that's the important thing that I've learned over the years, that some of the challenges we almost create for ourselves because we don't see the whole picture. We're not, or maybe it's not necessarily that we don't want to see the whole picture. We're not given a view into what the whole picture could look like and what possibilities exist in the world, but then also limiting ourselves to maybe in a way specialize in one particular area too early in our career, so that it almost feels like we're trying to play catch up and fill in some of those experience and knowledge gaps so that we can have a better, well-rounded background that frankly gives you a lot more flexibility to try new things and to take some of those career left turns when you don't necessarily expect them. So I think those are the things that, the big thing, yes, everyone's going to have failures and challenges. It's what we do with what we learn from those and how we change our outlook for the future that is the most important.
Yeah, no, I love that. And that resonated a lot with me. And something that kept coming to mind is that there's so many ambitious people, have the mentality of, you can do anything. This is so great. It's so expensive. But then they forget that you mentioned this, is that you kind of check yourself in the sense I had a very narrow view. They end up having very narrow views, which actually blocks off different opportunities and different growth. And absolutely love that as a challenge. I think that many ambitious people face is that we think that, we close off, or we think that we don't know, that we're still very ambitious, but in that opportunity being very open to what we need to actually learn or, figure out along the way. Wonderful one. Now, when you think about the future, what excites you about the future? What are you looking forward to?
So I think what's very exciting is just all of the advancement that we're seeing in technology. Now, healthcare in particular has been very slow in many ways to adopt some of these advanced technology solutions. Certainly through the pandemic, I think we saw a much accelerated digital transformation in the healthcare environment. I think that's what's really exciting about the future. There's so many new things coming to the market, changing the way that we approach healthcare and the business of healthcare. I think that's what's really exciting. And I just hope that we continue to keep our eyes open and look at those new technologies and adopt them and incorporate them into our workflows where we can. I think it's going to be so important, especially as we see some of the challenges in staffing and supporting patient care. And it's across the board. We're seeing it certainly in pharmacy, pharmacists, technicians in particular. We see it in nursing, and having new technology solutions to help us improve workflows, improve efficiency, and support our employees is going to be incredibly important.
Yeah, for Sure. Now, you elaborated a little bit about this when you talked about kind of challenges and what we need in terms of thinking about the different skills or learning new topic areas that might not just be focused on what we're doing. And so we talk a lot here about skills that we need, or maybe tools or items. And so as you think to the future, what tools do you think we need? Maybe what skills, how do you think we should move forward in thinking about how to build ourselves for current and future challenges?
So I think a lot of it from a skill set, if you're thinking tools from a skill set perspective, a lot of it is curiosity, but then maybe a healthy curiosity, willingness to think about some of the things that we're seeing. So from a technology perspective, like I said, I think technology is going to be important, but if we constantly jump at the first exciting technology that we see, we're going to potentially cause other issues downstream. So I think it's important that we're curious, we're always looking for those advancements, and we're preparing for adoption of those new advancements in the market, but then being able to take a step back, look at the market, look at what's happening, and really understand, if we do this, what could the potential outcomes be, so that we can prepare for all eventualities. If things go really well, if there's some challenges, if there's things that we need to do to pivot. I think that's really one of the biggest things from a toolkit for the future, is that curiosity and willingness to explore, but that healthy curiosity of stepping back and saying, let me just make sure, evaluate what's happening, and make sure that it is the right path forward, or that it's a path forward that we at least know that we can pivot or learn or grow from if things don't go quite as we would anticipate.
Yeah. I agree for sure there. Let's talk about the present, because we want to talk about the different initiatives that you're working on, kind of give you an opportunity to let us know maybe what you're currently doing. And so let's start out with let's start off by briefly talking about some things that you're working on that you're really excited about.
Sure. So I think there's really one major thing that I'm very excited about, and that our entire team at Premier, where I work, is extremely excited about. It's bringing an end to drug shortages. And so when I think about my career, I started certainly with a brand pharmaceutical manufacturer. And the closest that we got at the time, now there's other products in the market now that are a little more interesting in that brand space, but the closest that we ever got to a drug shortage in the brand pharmacy space was a wholesaler who stocked out of the product and had an unhappy health system that it was trying to purchase the product and had to wait for that wholesale distribution center to be restocked. What we've seen when I made the transition to working for UPMC is that drug shortages are an everyday challenge. And it's not one or two people that are trying to solve for them. It is many people across the entire organization, from pharmacy, supply chain, clinicians who are having to make decisions sometimes at the bedside with the patient in front of them and how they're going to deliver care. It is a national challenge. It's a national crisis. And so I think that's the most important thing that we're working on. And I was fortunate in the time that I spent at UPMC to really focus on that and helping one health system to manage shortages and putting in place some solutions that are important and can help support a longer term strategy. But it was really the transition that I made to Premier that has made a significant difference in my ability to address the drug shortage challenge. And so, this is a really exciting opportunity for me in working with Premier, as Premier has invested resources, both financial and people resources, in addressing this problem over many, many years. And so it's not an easy problem to solve for. It's certainly a multifaceted challenge, and it requires stakeholders from across the market to become engaged and involved. And so in the role that I'm in now, and being able to have visibility and insight into different aspects of the market, not just a single health system, but hundreds to thousands of health systems across the country in all settings of care, all classes of trade, from acute to non-acute to home care, we really get a very strong picture of what some of the challenges and opportunities are. And then we're able to combine that with close relationships with suppliers and finding ways to take some of the challenges out of the supply chain, whether it's manufacturing challenges or commitment. we've developed programs that address many of the issues that are related to drug shortages and are starting to actually see some positive results from the work that we're doing, the products that we are working hand in hand in partnership with our suppliers, our members, our health systems, and our distributor partners to bring those products to market where they didn't exist before, and have a committed and guaranteed supply channel for those items. We're starting to see stability in those products. And so it's certainly not something that we're done with. When we have more than 200 products on the ASHP and FDA shortage lists on any given day, there's still a lot of work left to be done, but we've seen some really strong results, and it's very exciting to see how bringing the market together, bringing our member health systems, our suppliers, and our distributors together to solve the issue is making really strong movement in terms of bringing us closer to a world where we may have no more drug shortages. So that's really my passion project, and I'm so very fortunate to work with Premier, with an organization that has invested so much time and effort into solving this problem with us.
Yeah, and just because that topic too in general within our audience is a significant one. It's one that we talk a lot about as well. And so I think it's one of those, it's an area of access to medicine that as healthcare providers, we think a lot about, and kind of as the general public notice it more, as their own drugs are very simple. What seems, very day-to-day medications just go completely short on a shortage. And so I think people are starting to, over the years, not even just starting to, right, over the years, really significantly talk about it. It's become a public issue in the sense of we're having conversations even beyond our circles of the health systems. We know that they definitely struggle with that. So actually building upon that, because I know my audience is this is a conversation we talk a lot about. Is there something, as more and more people talk about it and they'll tell you, okay, well, how do we solve it? Or what do you think we can do? Is there something simple that you can maybe share with us briefly just about, how do we even start to think about it, or how do we begin to even solve it? Because like you mentioned, and you mentioned this now, it's very complex, right? Like there's not just one particular stakeholder involved, but how do you begin to answer those questions? Because it is a very disheartening topic for a lot of people. It's something everyone wants to work towards, for sure.
Absolutely. So this is one of those areas where, as I mentioned before, it takes all stakeholders coming together to find the solution. What we've seen from the work that we've done with Premier, what we've seen is that having a committed market, so that's committed purchasing, committed supply, makes all the difference. Now, the challenge here, especially in the generics market, is certainly on the brand market, there's not a lot of room that healthcare providers have to negotiate price, to bring price down, or to really find savings in that space. And unfortunately, most of our healthcare providers are asked or tasked each year with finding cost savings. And there's almost always, you'll see a pharmacy cost savings goal that everyone is looking to achieve. And so we know that we can't do that by limiting care. We have to do that by finding creative ways to manage our formularies, to make sure that we're buying the most cost-effective products and putting the right products with, in our healthcare facilities. Challenge with that is sometimes you see, especially in the generics, there's a tendency to want to look for the lowest priced item at any given point. But that kind of a view or an approach to the market doesn't provide stability that our suppliers need to be able to forecast and manage their manufacturing capacity. It's very different in the generic market. You don't have full year constant manufacturing of some of these generic items. They're often manufactured in batches. So the supplier will manufacture what they believe that they need for a given point of time, and then they switch their line over to manufacture something else. And so if you see a change in demand or a change in the market, it's not always easy to respond to that. It's not always easy to get the raw materials that you need to respond to fluctuations in the market. So the more steady we can keep the demand in a market, the more steady our suppliers can respond and provide supply in the market. And so what we've seen in our program, so we certainly have our private label program where we work with suppliers to label products in the Premier label. It's guaranteed to go to the members that we have that have committed to purchasing those products. But we have another program called ProvideGx, where we match our members with our supplier partners in a dedicated distribution channel, and there's a commitment to purchase. So whatever volume that provider says, we will buy this product at this volume and we will commit to doing that. And so the manufacturer then is able to guarantee to put that supply in the market for those members that have committed to purchasing. And you would sometimes think, especially for some of these products that we've struggled with in the generics market, that price points are too low, and so we just can't manage it because price points are too low and we don't have suppliers that are willing to enter the market. What we've seen, even for some of these products that are in our ProvideGx program, we're seeing a savings on average of 9% for those products, because with that committed volume, the suppliers are able to better manage their manufacturing capacity, their investments, and the way that they're approaching their production schedules. And so it actually does lead to a savings. So that it seems almost, it seems strange sometimes when you think about the market. We've got to make sure we have the lowest price. But by committing to a product, making sure that that volume is there, and then both the supplier and our distribution partner hold additional dedicated safety stock inventory. So now we've got a double stock to keep our members safe. So far in this program, which we launched before the pandemic started, so it's been in place for about 3 years now, we've seen demand spikes of more than 150% for some of the products that are in the program. We've been able to maintain supply and keep members whole. But we've also seen that for the products that we've put into this program, 14 of the products, all of them had to be on the drug shortage list to begin with. But 14 of the products that we've put into the program have since been taken off of the drug shortage list. So we know that the work we're doing is contributing to stability in the market. We know that it's helping our members stay whole with the products that they need to deliver high quality patient care. So I think to summarize it all, though, you asked, what do we need to do? I think the biggest thing that we can do as a healthcare delivery organization here in the United States is find that way to match commitment, give our suppliers and our providers the ability to know what is coming and where it's coming from at a fair price, and we can make sure that there is that stability.
Yeah. And Jessica, you did mention that a lot of these initiatives you guys have been working on before the pandemic. I know some of them I've talked about too as potential solutions that organizations have done towards this issue, which is why I was kind of smiling within that, right? But so you as an organization, you as a team have experience kind of talking about drug shortages, working towards addressing drug shortages. Obviously, during the pandemic, the heightened awareness of drug shortages, the heightened awareness of different systems to make sure they have enough medications they need in general, whether it be pandemic related or not. But as a result of the pandemic, did you find anything that was a new initiative that came up, kind of something that you guys thought, okay, let's learn from the pandemic, or what's happening here to leverage to solve it as an overall goal?
Sure. So I think there's a couple of things that we did during the pandemic that I think is important to, again, focus on solving for drug shortages. So one of the ways that we address this, so we came together with our members and a supplier partner, and we actually invested in a drug manufacturer, so a US-based manufacturer. So one of the things that we saw throughout the pandemic, and I think it's important just to make a quick mention of this, right? We hear a lot about bringing generic drug manufacturing back to the US, which I think is a very important thing that we do engage in that discussion, having manufacturing here, either near shore or onshore, something that is easy to gain access to, because we saw very, very clearly in the beginning of the pandemic, was very difficult to get products out of China and India with some of the travel restrictions and limitations on bringing products over. So we need to be able to do that. But we also have to be very careful that we don't just shift over-reliance on one area to an over-reliance on another area. So from our perspective at Premier, we look at having a very diverse supply chain. We would like to see at least 3 regions or 3 suppliers that are supporting any one particular drug in the market here in the US. But as part of that, we felt it was important for us to set an example, and for us working with our members to set the example of how we can work together to build up some of that US-based resiliency. So we came together, we invested in a pharmaceutical manufacturer, and have 19 products that we're working on with that manufacturer that are all either shortage products or at risk, so generic injectables, that we're working with that manufacturer. And then the group of members who helped to then co-invest in this manufacturer are providing additional insight and guidance to that manufacturer on which products would be important to bring here next, to have that vertically integrated supply chain from raw material all the way through finished dose, and have that done. Again, onshore is ideal, but we do want to look at how do we diversify our supply chain.
Very nice. So definitely appreciate all of your efforts towards this issue. It is a huge issue, and it's one that definitely needs more initiatives, more thought process, more structure around trying to ensure access to these medications. So this is a big topic. And of course, the ultimate goal is to eliminate drug shortages, or at least reduce them to the best of the ability. And that's such a big initiative. And so when we transition to the next question of talking about success, whether you're looking at these big initiatives, right, with an ultimate goal that is a very ambitious goal, or whether it's a small project that you're working on or thinking about within your own teams, or personal or professional life, when you think about success, how do you define success and then create the environments for success?
So I think, success is often just basically defined as achieving business goals when you're thinking about working in a business framework. But I don't know that that is really sufficient to define truly what success should be. As I mentioned before, we have to look at least what I look at as sort of my true north is that helping patients. So there has to be a balance, and it's a balance between achieving business goals, making sure that our members, our healthcare providers, receive the information, support, and products that they need, and that they're satisfied, but that at the end of the chain, the patient is protected, they're receiving what they need, and they're receiving high quality patient care. So success is really a balance of all of those things. How do you make sure that you're keeping that patient whole, you're making sure that they have the best outcomes and cost and quality in the market? Our healthcare providers are getting what they need, but at the same time, you're balancing a business outcome. So that's really the hardest part. It's no one thing can take precedence. There has to be a balance. But again, we need to make sure that we keep that patient really top of mind as we're engaging in any of the discussions that we have, and any of the programs or projects that we put in place, that we're ensuring that we're delivering high quality patient care.
So let's just talk a little bit also about you as a leader, or us as leaders in general. Often it's hard for many leaders, knowing that they can't do everything, right? This is a reality that we all have. We can't do everything ourselves, but it's hard for many leaders to ask for help to create, to ensure the success of an initiative, right? Like if you are working towards a goal, you want it to be successful, but you can't do everything yourself. So can you maybe just tell us, or maybe recommend or have some advice for people that want to seek help or seek support in order to ensure the success of initiatives?
So asking for help is probably one of the hardest things I think that many leaders have. There's an expectation that's put on many leaders' shoulders that you need to be able to do this. You are the leader. You've got to have it handled. I think it's a mark of strength when a leader does ask for help. And I think that's one of the hardest things. And I know certainly for myself, I'm not always the best at asking for help. I mean, you can ask my family. I'm probably one of I ask them the least for help. But it's something that we have to be able to keep top of mind. Mm-hmm. There's entirely too many things that are pulling on not only our leaders, but all of our employees and contributors in the market today. I mean, we've seen it through the pandemic. Certainly our supply chain was tested from a resiliency perspective, but I think our employees and their resiliency has been tested. And it's really important that we look at asking for help as a marker of a healthy business relationship, and that we look for ways that we can continue to not only look for ways to help each other, but monitor ourselves and monitor our employees to make sure that we aren't in a situation where I typically am with my family, where you take everything on, you just keep piling more and more and more, and you don't stop to ask for help. And so I think it's really on everybody, not just leaders, but on individuals and colleagues across all parts of the market to keep our minds open, to look at each other, watch each other, make sure that we all seem like we have what we need, that we're okay, and that we can, if we can, where we can, offering help to each other. Because, like I said, I think sometimes people think that asking for help is a sign of weakness, but we need to start changing that paradigm in the market, that it's okay to ask for help, it's okay to delegate, it's okay to say no to certain things. And if we don't start doing that, we will truly see significant consequences and burnout, even more than we already see from our employees.
The thought process of changing the mindset around the topic is really important, right? And so if we automatically assume, instead of saying that a leader should know, the expectation is that they should do everything or should know how to do everything, versus now the expectation is everyone is going to ask for help, but it is at what point or for what, right? And so you're always kind of keeping an eye out for that, and you're already supportive of it. It's already receptive. And I think that's a very important point, because often we think about what's the specific strategies, but honestly, the mindset around it, right? How do we even think about whether it's required or not required, right? If we start thinking it's expected, then we can just work towards saying, okay, how do we support one another for that? Now let's talk about leadership. The topic of leadership, which is a big one, of course. We ask all of our guest leaders, how would you describe a leader in 2 or less sentences? You responded with, leaders have the passion to drive change, the curiosity to be continuous learners, and the resiliency to improve the future for those who depend on them. So can you elaborate on this and what shaped this outlook for you?
Sure. So I'll start at the end of the statement. It's that supporting those who depend on you. So it could be your family, it could be your team, the employees that work for you. I've been very fortunate in my career to have worked for leaders who truly looked at not necessarily how they could make their own position better, but how they can support the people that look to them for leadership. And so I think that's a really important thing that, as you look back to some of the earlier parts of that statement about change and lifelong learning, I think the market is always going to change. Not everybody handles change well, but as a leader, it's really incumbent upon you to be prepared, continuously learn, always know, or at least start to anticipate where the market could go, and ensure that you have the skills and knowledge that will position you well to respond to that change. Bring the people along who are relying on you. Make sure that they understand and that they're trained and that they're prepared for change. And then support them through that change, because there's only one, right? The only one constant, to bring more cliches into the discussion, the only constant in the world is change. And so as a leader, you're not prepared for that, and you're not prepared to help raise your team up to accept that challenge. I think that's where you see some issues with with growth and with the way that the market is going to move. And so, as I said, I was very fortunate in my career to work for a number of leaders who were very focused on making sure that the employees who work for them are well positioned, not only within their own organizations, but for whatever opportunities that would come up and would arise. And so that's, I think, what's important to me is really being there for my team, making sure that they're prepared, but then spending time to educate myself so that I can be the best supporter for them.
And it goes around, and I think many leaders have also kind of mentioned this concept of looking at leadership outwards, right? And then bringing that back to how it changes the actual leader and their leadership style, for sure there. Now, let's talk a little bit about leadership, maybe even across sectors, or as you obviously work with very diverse stakeholders in different industries of particularly within the supply chain. You mentioned already so many different types, but how do you think maybe, or does leadership differ across these different industries, or do you see similarities within that?
So I think that there's, there are certainly similarities across all business sectors. Leaders are always focused on success and customer satisfaction, making sure that they are prepared for success in the market. What's interesting in healthcare, and I don't think this is certainly not a unique feature in healthcare, but certainly the healthcare market, and however you'd want to call it, whether it's politicized or it's just a very highly visible space. And so in this market, it's a little different because, again, we have to go back to tying success and tying the focus of our leaders in healthcare back to that original construct that I shared, right? It's tying back to the patient. So in some other sectors where you can really just focus on business success, making sure that you're making money, that your customers are happy, and you can move on. In healthcare, we have to go down to another level and look at that patient. And it's really the triple aim for the patient: cost, quality, and outcomes. Mm-hmm. Are we delivering the best quality care at the right cost? And are we doing that so that it's to the benefit of the patient? And as I mentioned, again, maybe politicized isn't the best way to describe this, but looking at patient cost, quality, and outcomes has become a very hot topic in the country. And it's something that is being raised to all levels of government and all levels of the media. And so I think as healthcare leaders, that's a very different kind of lens that you need to function under. It's not just enough to make sure that your employees and your business are thriving. You have to make sure that your patients are thriving. And so it's a balance there, and how you balance your typical expectations as a leader and then rolling in that need to balance the outcomes for patients. And so I don't think healthcare is the only market that has that level of scrutiny and focus on non-traditional outcomes or non-typical areas of leadership focus, but it's certainly something in healthcare that leaders have to be ready to balance and to work through and to acknowledge. And I think the leaders that don't acknowledge that important tie back to the patient are the ones that don't fare as well in the long term.
Yeah. And with them having that lens, I think I definitely also see it with the amount of risk they're willing to take as leaders within that space does differ, right? Because you see that, because like you said, they're wearing those, or they're thinking about the patient, ultimately the patient and how it's affected. And obviously the goal is positive, but recognizing there also could be a negative influence within that. So that definite level of risk. Now, what leadership advice or kind of takeaways would you give our audience as they're thinking? Some of them have leadership positions now, some of them aspire to continue to grow in leadership. So, what can you provide them there? And does that advice really differ at different stages of your career?
Sure. I think, and you probably picked up this theme in some of the other answers that I've shared. I think the biggest advice that I could give anyone is to keep an open mind. It's something in my career that has surprised me over the years, the different turns that my career has taken, from sales to medical affairs and then into sales management. I never thought I would be there, but finding different ways to weave into that market. And then moving over into the provider side and leading supply chain of all things, right? No background in supply chain, but leading that type of an organization. Again, it was keeping your mind open to different possibilities and not becoming too focused on one thing in particular. It's very hard to map out step by step how to get from point A to a specific point B in your career, versus knowing and understanding what makes you passionate about your work and what drains you about your work. And if you know what really drives you and what makes you happy, and you're able to keep your vision open to opportunities that fit that mold, and you're able to steer away from things that drain you or make you unsatisfied with your work, I think that's the most important thing. But you can only do that if you keep an open mind and you're willing to try different things.
Yeah. And actually, I'm going to build upon that because I forgot to ask that before in terms of what are we getting wrong about leadership. And I think that so you talked about from an individual perspective. And so as a leadership, as a concept as a whole, in terms of what are we getting wrong? I know we mentioned a little bit about this, you and I before, but if you want to just elaborate on terms of what what do you think we're getting wrong about leadership and kind of integrating that whole open mind perspective towards leadership in general?
Sure. So I think, and I don't know that there's, generally as a concept, are we getting leadership wrong? Probably not. Because I think the great thing about leadership is that everybody has a different style and a different way of approaching things. And what's important about that is, given a specific situation, a specific type of leader is going to fit well there. Not every situation or every challenge or every opportunity is going to need the same kind of leader. And so I think what's important when we think about how we look at leadership, that we, again, need to keep an open mind. We don't want to overlook leaders who have a different skill set or a different way of doing things because they're not like us. It's very easy as humans, right? Yeah. We're familiar with the way that we do things. We like familiarity. We like things to be consistent with the way that our minds are built. So when someone comes in that has a very different style, sometimes it can be hard to accept that different style as success. And we might want to kind of discredit it as something that's not going to work. So I think the big thing is keeping an open mind, understanding that different styles, again, are needed for different types of situations and solutions. And so the best thing that we can do when we're thinking about leadership is not necessarily trying to build a mold that we constantly fit people into, but looking at leaders for their skills and their capabilities and matching them to the right time, the right place, and the right opportunity.
Yeah, that's fair. I love that combination, though, because we've talked about this throughout our conversation so far about looking inwards. And so even the open-mindedness of yourself and thinking about how you're thinking about things or kind of behavior going through kind of your career, and then looking externally, whether it's like growth, learning, or open-mindedness. I think there's so much value in doing both of those. Sometimes we only look internal, only look external, but that combination there is really fundamental. With those fundamental concepts of, we keep smiling every time we say that they're cliche, but they're so fundamental and so simple and basic that are very foundational to what many of us do. Now, the last question before we just talk briefly about or answer some of the audience questions, we like to take an opportunity to support one another and recognize the positive influence we have on one another. Can you name a woman or two, because people have cheated, who's inspired you, and why did you choose this person?
I'm glad you said that, because I was going to ask you if I could cheat on this and pick you.
They all have. It's like, I think of a couple, I was like, fine, I should just change it to two. But then I feel like if I ask two, they'll be like, can I do 3, 4? So you can cheat and do 2. That's
okay. Fine. Yeah, because I think the list is probably a lot longer than that.
Exactly.
But if I have to narrow it to 2, so I'll share it 2. So the first one would be, and I hope that she'll listen to this. I hope she won't be embarrassed about this, but the first is Mary Beth Lang. So she is currently Chief Pharmacy Officer for Kaiser. When I left Merck to join UPMC, Mary Beth hired me. And so I had an incredible fortune of working for her. Unfortunately, it was for a very short period of time, for about a year. And she's an incredible leader. She is the kind of person that impresses you with her knowledge of the market, with her ability to pick up and learn things and to grow and really to pivot and do many different things in the market. And she's also the kind of leader that, as I mentioned earlier, I've been fortunate to work for leaders who look to grow and develop and improve upon their employees. And Mary Beth is absolutely that leader. And so in the very short amount of time that I was able to work directly with her, I learned so much. And she was an incredible example and is an incredible example in the work she's doing with Kaiser for what a strong female leader can do in the healthcare market. So thank you to Mary Beth, and kudos for all of the wonderful things that she's been able to accomplish in her career. She's absolutely set the stage for other female leaders. And then here's my cheat, my second one. Okay, so this is, as I mentioned, I love learning, but I am also the worst person for reading work-related books. I have stacks and stacks of business books where I struggle to get through them. Yeah. I love reading fiction. Mm-hmm. So there is an author who is local to me in my hometown, and she started her career as a corporate attorney. Mm-hmm. And again, another one of those people who I think looked for the crazy off turns to do different things in her career, and she decided to become an author. Nice. And so she writes fiction. So fortunately, I love it, and I'll sit there and read it all day long. But she writes fiction about women, and her goal, and she's been very vocal about this, her goal is to find historical women and shine a light on their contributions to history, things that maybe were overlooked or weren't really highlighted in our traditional history textbooks. Now, she takes all of her research and she does an incredible amount of research, but then embellishes some of the, the fiction part of it to make it a true fiction, a novel. But she has profiled some incredible women, Albert Einstein's first wife, wow. Clementine Churchill, who else? I mean, there's a whole list of the books that she has. And so I just truly appreciate the work that she has done to raise the visibility on the importance of women throughout history and their contributions to our modern day lives, and our ability to do the things that we have. We have women like Hedy Lamarr. That's another one she's written a book about, who contributed the technology that is in your cell phone. And you would never know those things because it's sort of been lost to history. So she's another woman that when I think about women who have inspired me, the author, her name is Marie Benedict. And
I was going to ask you what her name is.
I was getting there. Sorry, I forgot to mention that.
No, you're totally fine.
So Marie has done a fantastic job of highlighting women in history. And so I truly enjoy reading her novels.
That's incredible. Yeah, you forget that there's different ways in terms of, especially if you want to uplift stories or to highlight stories of different women, there's different ways to do it. I wouldn't have thought, in terms of an author taking it in a more fiction type format, but to shed light, it's just, it's always very nice to see those different things. Now we have a little bit of time for some audience questions. Our audience focuses a lot on talking about engaging with diverse stakeholders. We've kind of seen that trend throughout many of our guest leaders. So first question actually about more of the stakeholders is, how would you build trust and engage the necessary stakeholders to ensure the success of your projects?
So I think, and we see this all across business, silos. Everybody likes to be in their little silo. They keep the group that they know they work well with, that has similar backgrounds, similar thoughts and ideas. You work together. And so everybody's in their little silo, and it can be hard sometimes to break this down, especially since a lot of the projects that we need to focus on, especially in healthcare, cut across many different aspects of care delivery, of settings of care. And so you have to be able to engage closely with individuals who are in sort of a different group or have a different mindset than you do. And so the big thing there, and it's often easy, I think, for individuals to, again, thinking about what makes human beings comfortable is what we know. And when there's something that they don't know, they become uncomfortable and they start to shut down. I think the best thing that we found as far as breaking down barriers and engaging with diverse stakeholders in project work is to set the expectation that it's okay for us to be in an uncomfortable space, that we need to be here to learn, and we are going to oftentimes overextend to invite other stakeholders into a discussion. So maybe you don't want to be invited to the 10 meetings that I have this week about this topic, but it's really important that you're there because we need to have your perspective and we need to understand what's important to you. Because until we do that, we're going to continue to have these silos. We have to be able to break down those silos by really digging deep into understanding the needs and backgrounds and beliefs of all of the people that we have to engage with on projects, or it becomes very difficult to be successful. So I think that's one of the biggest things. That's how you build trust, is you truly dig in to understand, and you truly listen, and you internalize what you're learning, and you show how that knowledge and that internalizing of the differences can actually change the outcomes of the project or change the direction of the project to make sure that everyone feels included.
Yeah, wonderful question. We have a question on, how do you prioritize and know what to work on?
Oh, that's hard because depending on who you talk to, everything is a priority, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Everything is a priority. And it's hard. And I think you have to look at, as I mentioned earlier, what's the balance that we need to strike in business between business outcomes, member satisfaction and support, and then patient outcomes. And then I even think personally, because that's a big part of the way that I lead as a leader, and I haven't talked about it yet, and so I apologize for not bringing this up, but that personal impact is important as well. You have family, you have commitments to family and friends, and that also has to be another balance in the way that you look at things and prioritize. And we sometimes hear the joke when you have paid time off, PTO. It's not really paid time off, it's partial time off, because you're still taking phone calls, you're still doing things.
Yeah.
And so there's a balance, and you have to be able to look at all of the different things that are pulling at your time and your focus. And from all of those 4 buckets, whether it's a business impact, a member impact, patient outcomes, or even a family impact, what is the most important in any of those categories? And those are the things that you have to prioritize. So there's going to be ways that, there may be business objectives that just don't come to the top of the list when you've got a patient outcomes objective that has to be achieved. So again, it's not an easy answer for, I can ruthlessly prioritize by cutting out all of this or that or the other. It's really looking at those now 4 different areas of balance to say, here's where I need to spend my time. And I think the biggest part of this is not so much the prioritization isn't easy, but I think we all have to get better at saying no and being okay with prioritizing. Yeah. It's okay to step away and say, this is time for this, or I need to do this because the outcome is too important to me or the business or my patients.
That's fair. Now, I do want to be respectful of your time because we are about at time. So is there anything else that that you want to tell our audience or mention that you haven't already mentioned before we close out today?
I don't know. I think we've talked about a lot of different things. I think the important thing here is, again, when you're thinking about your career and your path and where you want to end up, I just can't reiterate enough that it's so important to just keep that open mind. Get to know as many different stakeholders in the market as you can, explore things that you never thought you would have an interest in, because until you actually try something like green eggs and ham, until you try it, you don't know if you're going to like it. So I think that's the biggest thing, just keep an open mind.
Yeah. No, I've loved it. I think the general theme of when we started about our true north and how you've progressed and kind of keeping that and keeping foundational elements. It's very apparent from our conversation, your foundational elements, but I think many of us and many of the audiences, it's very important for us to continuously think about what are foundational elements, and then that having that open mind will allow us, it will bring in the color to all of these different elements. So thank you so much, Dr. Daley, for being with us today, for sharing your insights and your perspectives on this. We could talk for hours for sure, but greatly appreciate you taking the time and talking about this, and best of luck as we all really work towards improving drug shortages. Hopefully in the next conversation, we'll just talk about how few we have, and
the solution will be in place.
Exactly. We'll just talk about what it used to be like, right? Hopefully working towards that. But yeah, thank you for your team and everyone's efforts as they work towards improving that. And to everybody, thank you for listening. We have several other guest leaders, and you can listen to previous guest leaders as well on our website. So thank you all and have a wonderful day.
Thank you, Rola.
Thank you.